Hello Year 7, welcome to your next lesson on the Horn of Africa. We are continuing to look at the Danakil Depression today. Don't forget you've done a sort of 3-lesson sequence now, including this one. The first one, we learnt about the tectonic processes, the things going on under the ground that mean that the tectonic plates we stand on move. We then learnt that there was a particular part of the Horn of Africa where this was particularly interesting and created this Danakil Depression. And today we're going to go on to actually look at some human geography and look at one of the human jobs that can be done here and have a look at some of the interesting challenges of that job. But anyway, before we do that, let's get our memories working. Let's build on last lesson. Could you copy and complete this sentence? And if you've still got any time left of the 5 minutes, could you either write or draw how the Danakil Depression was formed? So let's see how much you can remember. 5 minutes. Pause the video now. Okay, so the answers to this first part, the Danakil Depression is located in the northern part of the Afar Triangle, an area of lowland in the north of Ethiopia. Those maps at the bottom there, hopefully reminding you of some of last lesson. You can see the Afar Triangle very nicely in that middle map, zoomed in on the right with the Danakil Depression there shown quite clearly in the north, that darker sort of slightly greeny area, and on the left you've got that map of the various countries. So if you got onto the challenge, hopefully if you drew something, it would have looked like this. This is a diagram we drew last lesson. We drew the 2 tectonic plates and we drew them moving apart. Why were they moving apart? Well, we go back a lesson for that and we look at the convection currents going on under the ground in the mantle of the Earth. Remember, those were caused by the heat of the core. Hot liquid rises. So we've got rising magma here, rising molten rock, which meant that we had a lot of tectonic activity in the middle, but that the land here had sunk down, and we had therefore our depression, this area here where the land was lower and flatter and, than the rest of the land around it. And we also knew, and you'll see today a little bit more, that this area is quite volcanic. Quite a lot of volcanoes here. As this magma is rising up, it is easier to get to the surface and we get a lot of volcanoes. So well done if you got that as well. Let's move on and have a look at what today's lesson is actually all about. So the job I mentioned earlier, well, that job is salt mining. So could you please copy the title? Could you make sure the date is there? Read through the objectives, make sure you've got the equipment you need, pretty basic today. And we'll move on as soon as you've done that. It should take no more than 1 minute. Pause the video now. Okay, so we already kind of recapped a little bit at the start, but let's just do it again. Last lesson, you learnt how the Danakil Depression was formed. And this lesson will explain the unique situation that has led to salt being found in the depression. It will then teach you about the people who are using the area to work and their lives. So to begin with, let's talk about why there is salt in the Danakil Depression. And you can see a picture there of some interesting sort of salt formations. So a reminder, a depression is an area of sunken land. It can be caused by a number of factors such as tectonic activity. You're going to watch the video here and then you're going to just write 3 adjectives to describe the Danakil Depression. Nice, simple, quick task here. The Danakil Depression is, and then you can just list the 3 words afterwards, and that is job done here. But an interesting video just to get you really seeing some of the quite amazing landscape that the Danakil Depression has, caused by its tectonic activity, caused by the volcanoes there and how close the magma is under the ground. So spend no more than 5 minutes on this task and we'll move on. Pause the video now. Okay, so subtitle please. How did the salt get there? Quickly write that down and we'll move on. Pause the video. Okay, so let's start answering this question. I'm going to go through it with you, and then very simply I'd like you to jot down the diagram and the words that I'm going to put on the screen. So we first of all have our depression. We are starting with the depression formed. So let's draw our depression. There it is. Sea levels increased. So this was a very, very long time ago. Sea levels rose and actually filled the depression up. So the depression is now a sea, or it's part of the oceans. There we go. What happens next? Well, over long periods of time, you've learned about, or you will learn about climate change, in more detail in next year, in fact. But you may know a little about it already. You may know that at the moment we have a rising sea level. Well, the sea levels have gone up and down throughout time, over thousands, over millions of years, many, many, many times. So the sea levels rose again, and the water became trapped. So we now have a little bit of water here. It's now trapped. It can't get out of this area. And due to the heat and the intense sunlight, that water evaporated. So let's have our depression again. We're going to do a nice primary school level sun, because that's nice and clear. There it is, beating down on the ground. The heat, the water evaporated. I often like showing that like that, sort of, you can almost imagine that's the water disappearing up into the air. And the salt was left behind. So how do you draw salt? Well, salt is little crystals. So I'm going to put lots of little dots all along the bottom where the water was, all along the bottom here, left on the land, lots and lots of salt crystals. So the salt is left behind because it is too dense. It is not able to be evaporated. The salt is not able to be evaporated with the water, so it is left behind. And that is why we have these large flat layers of salt on and in the ground around and inside the Danakil Depression. So you can draw those diagrams next to the pictures. Remember, this one linked to that, this one linked to that, and this last diagram linked to both of those last points. So jot the diagrams down to support the writing, copy that into your book, and I hope that makes sense. If there's anything there that doesn't, obviously email your teacher and we're more than happy to explain something and help again. So pause the video here and get cracking with that. Okay, so a couple more videos to watch. Use those links at the top, hopefully put into class charts as well. Use those videos to answer these questions in full sentences. A to F at the bottom there. Just take about 15 minutes to watch it all and answer those questions. Don't forget, full sentences, please. The depression is this many meters below sea level, for example, for A. Over to you. Pause the video and get cracking with that. Okay, so here are the answers to those questions. The depression is 100 meters below sea level. Camels are called ships of the deserts. The Red Sea used to cover the area. The worker cuts 150 slabs each day. The yellow mounds are sulfur deposits. And the salt crusts can be 100 meters thick in some places. Please double check those answers, make sure you've got them correct. If you haven't, spend a minute correcting them now. Otherwise, we can move straight on to the next slide. Okay, so when we talk about salt mining, what do we mean? Well, digging up natural salt resources to make money. Simple as that. If you could just quickly copy that down, leave a line from the last task, just copy that sentence down, and you can highlight this maybe, make this stand out as a definition in your work. So get that done. It should take 30 seconds. Pause the video now. Okay, so let's start looking at the experience of actual salt miners themselves. Can you read through the job description? Now, this should be attached as a PDF to class charts, but it'll also be on the next slide. The PDF is probably easier to read. You can zoom in. However, if that's not a possibility, don't worry. On the next slide, we've got the full text to read through and the questions again on that next slide to help you. So read through the job description and answer these questions again in full sentences, please. Why do you think salt is considered to be white gold? Salt is considered to be white gold because, and then answer the question, and so on through those tasks. It should take about 10 minutes. Get cracking with that now. I'm going to switch to the next slide for you to pause there if you need it. Otherwise, open the PDF. So pause now, or just wait a second and pause on the next slide. Okay, let's work through some answers. The salt is considered to be white gold because of the value that it can sell for. As you know, gold is very expensive, and salt, whilst not quite as expensive as gold, it's being compared to gold to make it clear that this is a very precious material. Number two, working conditions for the miners are tough due to the extreme heat that they face, which means they have to start work early in the morning. The work is often very hard, and they have no mechanical support. They have to use camels to transport the salt as the region is so remote. Number three, the salt miners have to face temperatures in excess of 50 degrees Celsius. Really, really hot. Number 4, so many of the Afari people become salt miners because of the amount of money they can earn to support their family, and also in the region there is a lack of other work. So it is a purely economic reason, but obviously money and income is very important to people. So there we go. If you need to make any corrections, add anything that you've missed, please do so now. Pause the video, otherwise you can move on to the next slide. Okay, so do you think that salt mining is a good job? I'm going to ask you to write 2 paragraphs, very short little paragraphs, 2 P paragraphs to answer this question. So tip number 1, as I said, use a P paragraph. Point, evidence, explain. That's the structure that you need to write in. And I'm going to help you out with that with the sentence starters. You've written sentences like this before, paragraphs like this, in lessons on Dubai or motorways. Tip number 2, don't forget you can use the job advert for your evidence. So I want you to take specific facts and pieces of evidence from that to support your answer. Okay, so the sentence starters at the bottom, they're going to help you. So for paragraph number 1, salt mining is a good job because there's your point. Then you give a specific piece of evidence, or at least one, to support that main point, that argument that it is a good job. The evidence I have for this is, and that's the evidence part of P. And finally, you explain. This means that, or something similar to that. You don't have to use these words exactly. By all means, if you think you can do a different job or it helps you to write it in a slightly different way, go for it. Go for it. You don't have to use these words, but they're there if you need them. But you need to explain why that piece of evidence and that point is good. What are the impacts? Think socially. Think about the people themselves and their lives. Think about the economy. Think about jobs and money and income. Maybe even think about the environment around them. These are all things we want to think about when we're explaining. Then you write the second paragraph, which follows exactly the same structure, but is negative. However, salt mining is not a good job because. And then finally, you offer a single sentence or two with your overall opinion. I think that overall salt mining is or is not a good job. You choose which one you want because, and here's the potentially more challenging bit, because you need to argue why one of those 2 other paragraphs is more important if you can. Why is it that you think it is good? Why is that more important than the negative you said? Or why is a negative more important than what's good? Absolutely no right or wrong answer to point number 3. It's personal, it's based on your opinion. Give it a go. So overall, this should take probably 10 to 15 minutes to put together and write, and a bit of thinking time. If you find that time is running out, make sure you've got paragraph 1 and 2 done. If you haven't quite got to number 3, fine. If the 10 minutes, 15 minutes has run out, that's fine. Just get on with number 1 and 2, make sure they're solid and they're really good. And I'm going to show you an example on the next slide, but I'd like you to give it a go first. So pause the video now, give that a go, and then we'll have a look at my version of this answer. Okay, so here's my version. I'll read through it. Salt mining is a good job because you can make lots of money from selling the salt. The evidence I have is that people can sell the salt for over $5 a slab. So there's my point, followed by my evidence. This means that people have a chance to improve their lives by making more money than they might have done in other jobs or without a job. So to clarify, there is my point. We move to the second paragraph. However, salt mining is not a good job because people have to work in harsh climates and temperatures. There's my other point. So my evidence up the top, I've already read that through, is the fact that they can sell it for that amount of money. My evidence for the second point is the evidence I have used for this is the extreme temperatures that can exceed 50 degrees Celsius. And I've almost basically gone into explanation for this second bit. So I'm going to kind of stop there actually. And this is not good for their health, really, is moving into the next bit. So let's look at the top again. This means that people have a chance to improve their lives by making more money than they might have done in other jobs or without a job. The explanation here is really, this is not good for the health of the workers. This could cause them to become ill and then not be able to work and provide for their families. So we've got 2 sides to this story. We then move to the final opinion. I therefore think that salt mining is not a good job for the main reason that health should come before making money. There's my argument. Now, like I said before, if you've come up with a different argument, if you've chosen that it is good, you're not wrong. I'm not wrong. It is personally based on opinion, so don't worry. So good job. Let's move on. Okay, if you have time, because I appreciate there's quite a lot of work here in this lesson, and it depends how quick you can get through it. You may very well have now spent your full hour. So if you have, great job, you now know about salt mining and the Danakil Depression and some of the issues there. If not, if you've got some time left, if you've got 5 to 10 minutes left, then we're going to have a look at the future. So we're going to read through this text here, and I'm going to get you to decide on whether we should build this road. So read through those 2 paragraphs, and on the next slide, we'll make that decision. Pause the video now. Okay, so with that information in mind, and remember you can rewind to go and have a look at it. Don't forget we've got all the evidence from before about what's going on in the Danakil Depression with the salt miners and their job, and the good and the bad things, the advantages and disadvantages of that work. Do we build the road or do we not build the road? There's no right or wrong answer. I want you to write a small paragraph explaining if you think this should or shouldn't happen. And again, this is a task just like the P paragraph. I don't think I said it before, but the P paragraphs as well as this, these are tasks which you can absolutely great to see as teachers. A bit of creativity on your behalf, a bit of independent work on your behalf. It's lovely to see these things, and great examples are going to get achievement points from us. So feel free, please do share it with us. We do love to see what you're doing. Anyway, get thinking about this, write your answer, and this is now the end of the lesson. So thank you very much for your time. Take care and goodbye.